So today we are here to talk with John Nobbs about his book he wrote this year in 2019, Every Little Bit, the Nobbs Suzuki Primer. And I'm specifically focusing in on chapter 5, starts on page 75, the Wagner, Suzuki, Kubrik chapter, where you talk about how Suzuki is similar to Wagner and how Suzuki is similar to Stanley Kubrick.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'd like to start just by sort of saying broadly the type of comparisons that you make. So in particular, you speak about how Suzuki and Wagner share an aesthetic, mm-hmm. and how Suzuki and Kubrick share a process.
Correct. I suppose you could reduce it to those simple issues. There are wider things too. Yes, well, first of all, I'd just start by saying I was very keen. Suzuki's is not as famous or as regarded successfully as I think he should be, and so I've decided to write these books about him and introduce what he's done, both in terms of his amazing training and also his amazing aesthetic, which Chelsea has seen a number of times too, most recently in 2016, 17.
I can't remember. Suzuki came to Singapore.
No, yes, okay, well, even less than that. So you've seen several situations.
Yeah.
But the thing about Suzuki is, because his theatre, it's Japanese, he's not as actually understood as I think he should be. And so I've used this chapter to compare him with the works of Richard Wagner, the famous opera composer, and Stanley Kubrick, the famous film director. And so because their work is very well known and is represented in many situations, so it's a way of just pitching him up against those two.
Yeah. I think as well it's interesting because Suzuki has a training that was heavily inspired by traditional Japanese No and Kabuki,
mm-hmm.
that his training is often seen as his aesthetic.
Correct.
And in that process, his aesthetic is misunderstood.
Very
as
much
a Japanese...
Well, as a type of
style,
Japanese theatre,
yeah.
As a sort of, I guess you could say, almost ghettoised in the sense it's sort of the Japanese bin, the Japanese shelf. And we think, I'm sure, all of us who have trained with Suzuki, worked with Suzuki and watched Suzuki, just how there is a difference between his aesthetic and his actual training system.
Yeah.
And the problem, I suppose, is we'll get this in another chapter, which is about toga, how toga overwhelms people. So I've been interested in Wagner since I first went to London in 1979, and we watched the Ring Cycle
mm-hmm.
in its entirety, which is one of his most famous pieces and the biggest piece, I guess. And so that was well before I met Suzuki.
Mm.
Jackie and I were both highly enchanted and inspired by Wagner. And what he shares with Suzuki, I suppose, when you see a Wagner opera, it's very much a Wagner opera.
Mm.
Often, if you look at an Italian opera, opera's divided into two things. There's Italian opera and Wagner, really. Wagner's people like Strauss as well. But he rewrote the whole book, and Italian opera probably could be simplistically defined as a whole lot of activity, then an amazing song, then a whole lot of activity, then another amazing song, whereas Wagner's welded all those things into one indistinguishable fabric. So there's no arias in Wagner's operas like there might be in the Italian operas. And most Italian operas are very sort of realistic too. They're ordinary people doing ordinary things. And they happen pretty quick. Wagner's essentially more myth. I think all of his films really about mythological figures, like Lohengrin, the Ring Cycle is essentially mythology, and things like Meistersinger is about real people, but most of them actually about mythological figures, mythic figures.
Mythic figures. And so when you say that his opera is mythic, do you mean it just in the sense that the content or the characters or the stories he's exploring are based on mythology, or is it something more than that?
It's a very good question. Actually, it's much more than that. His subject is myth and mythological figures, but it also, the presentation is very mythological. So you'll see something like Tristan and Isolde, his great love opera, and you'll see a set with this giant sail on stage and 3 people. So rather than crowds of people milling in village squares or in ballrooms and things like that, there's just these sort of powerful landscape, a huge landscape, a mythic landscape, so to speak, and then 3 or 4 people inside that. So it's rendered sort of larger than life. And the voices, of course, opera voices are larger than life. That's a mythology in itself.
Yeah.
And he reduces it to these sort of gods interacting with each other, and maybe gods interacting with humans, but essentially it's got the same as the Greeks did their sort of theatrical productions. They're about gods and humans. And he, in a sense, wanted to take opera back to a sort of a Greek drama, which was actually holistic in the sense that all the aspects of it married with each other. So rather than have singing separate from the activity, he married them all together into one indivisible landscape.
And it's interesting as well that you talk about how Wagner wanted to go back to traditional Greek drama, because Suzuki in many ways has done the same thing. And do you think there is a similarity there as well in their approach to performance, in the way that operatic voice is used and Suzuki's utterance is used?
Very good point. John Broken is labelled Suzuki's style of speaking, I suppose, as a type of utterance, which is, yes, it is mythological, and he often apparently uses Japanese language, which is very arcane, and that people don't actually understand. So as far as the modern Japanese audience might listen to their own language, it's like them listening to Chaucer or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm told that. I don't know because I don't speak Japanese. But yes, it's very true. They both went back to their own historical roots. Suzuki with No and Kabuki. And No is a mythical form too, and so is Kabuki in a way. It's a bit more grandiose, a bit more theatrical. But both of them tend to have got nothing to do with realistic theatre or like with Stanislavski, much more where time and space are shifting and morphing rather than just people sort of chatting to each other. And so, and Wagner shares that too. He wanted to go back to sort of German prehistory, so to speak. The idea of Siegfried, these are German myths that predate, I'm not sure how old they are really, but they are as important to the German-speaking peoples as the No and Kabuki are for the Japanese people. And such that they're sort of disconnected. Of course, the language is the same. And there's also a spatial quality about Wagner's music. There's a spatial quality about Suzuki's productions you've seen.
Absolutely.
And there's a sort of as you felt, there's an amazing tensile relationship between the beings in the space, isn't it, in Suzuki's place? There's an actual incredible energy.
Relationship,
And it's not just a bunch of people sort of wandering around doing stuff. And Suzuki's very specific about that, isn't he? He really pays a lot of attention to that type of, you could say spatial mythology, if you want to say something like that. And we've seen it too. So when you see a Suzuki production, you really feel it as much as you see it. You feel this visceral energy coming off the actors. He's wound them up so they become almost mythological in size and scope and voice. And then he also places them very mythologically, the way he uses lighting, extremely sculptural in his sculptural space. So I find the same thing when I'm watching a Wagner production, because the sound fills the air, of course. You're surrounded by this sound. And then the sort of the mise-en-scène, the activity, actually mirrors that sound. It's much larger than life. I suppose it's easy for Wagner because sound is sort of everywhere. But Suzuki uses music like that too, doesn't he?
Also, I think the sound of the Suzuki actors in a similar way surrounds the space, because it's larger than life. It's not conversational. And
you really get time to feel that, don't you? There's the thing, people say, people accuse Wagner of taking forever to do certain things. That's true to a certain extent. But it does allow you to move into a sort of a zone where you think in terms of different time frames, aren't you? Not just watching people sort of fight and kill each other and sort of go off and kiss and make up and get married and have children. It's actually much more, it's much slower, so you're allowed to actually get into that visceral, tactile space.
And so on page 80 in your book, you talk about the time Wagner takes and how the listener is kind of on a journey with him as well. And I wonder, is it that Wagner could use just a good editor, or is that time that it takes to get to those moments, those sort of transcendent moments, is it about the time, or could he do it if he shortened it?
Well, the other thing to say about Wagner is Wagner wrote his own libretti. He wrote the words. Now, that's almost unique in opera. In Italian opera, you had a writer, then you had a musician to put the words together, so a composer, somebody who wrote the lyrics and somebody who wrote the the music. So he wrote himself, and you could argue he's very wordy. In fact, there's huge chunks of, say, for instance, the first act of sequence is like a giant sort of, recapitulation of everything that went on before it, because you could go outside and come back and nothing much has changed. But it does put you in a different zone. It was very much interesting for us. We saw an opera called Rheingold, which is the first of the four of the Ring cycle. And it's only 3 hours long, which makes it pretty short in Wagnerian terms. And it's essentially a sort of a resume of the actual lead up to how the opera proper starts. And we'd seen it in London in 1979, and then we saw it again recently here at QPAC about a year or so ago. It was amazing to get back into it because you immediately got sort of swept. It was like being in the ocean. It was really, you weren't listening to something, you were actually being surrounded by the sound and a sense of, you were floating on a type of sound. Because he's very big on long, wide chords, which are both, some of them sort of are earth chords and sort of sky chords and things like that, but they essentially are very, very tactile, and they're very, very, for instance, in the opening of the Ring cycle, it starts off with 8 minutes of just one chord, starting sort of the history of the earth and waves building up, and it's incredibly hypnotic. And we found after, 30 years, that actually I sort of remembered the feeling of the whole thing. And it was a astonishing experience because I felt as though I sort of gone into some sort of sauna, as it were, some sort of flotation chamber. I was floating on the sound of Wagner. And you could say the same with Suzuki, because it's so thick, it's so viscous. There's a whole different attitude than if you're sort of just going on to watch a show, clap at half time and then go home. There's a much better being immersed in a type of piece of art, a piece of... The art's both liquid and solid and gaseous. It's astonishing. So I was surprised at how much I'd remembered in terms of the feelings. And I just sort of got back and I just sit back and the thing just sort of get swept along by this whole experience. It was pretty extraordinary. So I'm not sure I got that question, but it's a viscerality, I think, that they share in the same way. And I don't think any other, there are other directors who don't know this. The only people like that about Wagner are the Strausses and to a certain extent, Strausses and Schoenberg's early stuff, where they actually have taken that idea and sort of morphed into something a bit different, but also grounded in the same way. I suppose you could say we're trying to do that with Suzuki back here.
I guess I also wouldn't mind asking about if people were to say, and I do think this comparison has been made, but I'm not going to be quoting quotes, that Suzuki's theatre is the same or inspired by traditional No or traditional Kabuki, and in that way, how was his unique or separate from that?
Well, he gets pretty cross if you say he's just No. In fact, I think in a way he is a modern version of No. The more I see his work, and the more recent work, has got a denseness and a sort of an ablative quality that No has. I'm not an expert on No. I've seen probably 6 or 7 No performances, so I've seen a few of them. I wouldn't say I was an expert by any stretch of the imagination. But it seems to me that he invented the No is essentially a type of spiritual theatre, in the sense that it is generally about ghosts, unrequited, young women who died before they could get married, things like that. And so there's essentially ghost stories, and there's stories about sort of lost souls caught between the earth and whatever heaven might be. And I always maintain that Suzuki's work, his serious work, because he does a lot of pantos and fun stuff as well, but his serious work always has an element of being a sort of spiritual zone. And so I think that's very similar to Wagner too. And I think he's taken No. See, in Japanese theatre you've got No, and then you've got Shingeki, which is new theatre, which is the same as our David Williamson or...
Your American realism.
American realism, exactly. And what he's done is bridge that truly huge gap between this traditional thing and this modern thing. And he's actually placed something in the middle. And I suppose you could argue he's pulling the two of those things together. He's taken... they're not pretending to be ancient Japanese, they're often ordinary people, but he dresses them in such a way as it tends to sort of mythologise their character into more of a zone about something which is a Japanese spirit or essence continuing through to this day. So I'm not sure if this shares that with Wagner, but Wagner did the same thing with German theatre, I suppose you could argue.
So another thing you say on page 76 is that Wagner had the biggest ego of all time. And I kind of wondered if Wagner has a big ego, does Suzuki too?
Well, I think it's rather different. Wagner did a lot of writing and became infamous for his so-called anti-Semitic writings. Although you won't find anything anti-Semitic in any of his work itself. There's just absolutely nothing in his work. So that whole thing is really about his reputation. And he was a bit of a revolutionary. He ran away from several situations and was actually on the run a lot, which is quite extraordinary because when he ran at the ringside, he was actually on the run.
Okay.
Not literally every day.
Yeah,
he was actually outlawed in several countries. So they were sort of out to get him because of his revolutionary activities, which were, I don't think he threw bombs or anything, but he was very, very inflammatory in his language. So the astonishing thing about Wagner's ego is he had the strength of character to write a 20-year opus.
Yeah.
It would take him 2 years to write the notes down. Wow. 2 years to write the notes down. So it took 20 years to write this thing. He's on the run for the whole time. Yeah. So here he is with this, on the run, so not daily, but in a sort of displaced situation. And then he decided the opera house, and there's no opera house in Europe that could actually stage these things. So then he made his own opera house. I mean, it's astonishing. So what I'm trying to say is that Suzuki's, I don't think, has got the same, he certainly hasn't got the same apparent ego. I think Suzuki's extremely intelligent in an unconscious way. We've seen how it works. We've seen how it does operate, and we're quite amazed that he produces these things. He's had this place in Toga since 1974 or something, and that just goes from strength to strength, whereas all around us, all our sort of culture, things are sort of just falling apart, really. And he's just powering on. And so, see, I think he's got this incredible sensitive political understanding of the way the world works, and obviously the way political culture works in Japan, and he's just ridden this wave incredibly well. He continues to do so to this day. So he's very different from Wagner in that sense. He has got the same overt ego. Wagner was always trying to sell himself in a big way, really big way, and he'd write these pamphlets and he'd sort of make these amazing sort of assertions about himself. And really he put down other people. He would bump into someone like Meyer there and just sort of castigate him roundly for being blah, 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 blah. So I mean, it was very, very pugnacious. Tiny guy. He was only about 5'2", very short. And he had that sort of belligerent quality. So not only is he writing this stuff, he was actually very belligerent about the way he promoted himself. And Suzuki's not belligerent at all. Yeah. If anything, he's the opposite. He actually doesn't promote himself. Yeah. And we've seen the way Suzuki takes bows after those big shows. Yeah. He just comes on, slumps on, microphone in hand, and sort of stops the audience clapping at him, and just starts talking about these amazing bits of trivia in a sort of very relaxed, sort of fatherly fashion. Yeah. And Wagner wasn't like that at all. So they are very different in that sense, I would say.
And to play devil's advocate, Suzuki, his company is named after him, his training is named after him. He does control every aspect of what goes on in Toga, what comes to Toga, what leaves from Toga. And I guess what I'm trying to look for is what distinguishes that sort of level of control and, I guess, naming, like taking ownership of something that you've created.
Japan's a fascinating thing because, as we know, it's a country where the nail that pokes its head gets bashed down. And so it's a very powerful, oppressive culture for individualism. Yeah. And we all know that. It's probably changing now. But the paradox is that the guy that pushes through, he just cleans up. Yeah. They just get this thing. So he wouldn't be allowed to own that name in the West. Yeah. None of us would be able to say that. I mean, because I can say Nobbs Suzuki Practice, but I can't say the Nobbs Theatre Company. Because sooner or later it will just come undone, but he can get away with it. And that's that paradoxical nature of, I mean, this thing must lose $10 million a year, we know that. Yeah. Nobody pays for tickets. Yeah. It's free, and he's got what would be the company size? 30 people,
30 to
35,
40, something like
maybe,
that, yeah.
maybe 30 actors. So
Yeah.
huge number, and they'll get paid very well too.
Yeah.
They're not amateurs. They're not paid, chicken wages. So so I guess that's to do with the nature of the way he sits in that sort of political context, and it's something we can't really understand because our Western way of doing stuff is totally. There's nothing like this. There's nothing like Toke. The closest thing to Toke is probably, funnily enough, would be the Bayreuth Festival which is Wagner's own festival, but that only goes for 3 weeks every year, and it's all to do with the works of one man. It's a shrine to him, and of course he's dead. Well, Suzuki's very much alive and kicking, and this thing's just still building as we speak.
Yeah.
So that's a different cultural perspective which couldn't exist. Can't exist in our context.
Yeah. On page 78, you talk about spiritual strength and how both Wagner and Suzuki, it's required to have strong spirit, not just to perform their work, but also to watch it.
It's very true. I mean, Wagner's, because the opera's got, if you see the ring cycle, it goes 4 nights. So the first opera's 3 hours, there's 4.5 hours, then 5.5, and then 6 hours. So you're looking, so even when you go at the half time, everybody goes to the Pizza Hut, and they're also reading these Wagner programs in the Pizza Hut next door. So it's an astonishing experience. They might go say, I think that's like Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. So they're not 4 nights in a row because the singers couldn't take it.
Yeah. Because
it's a marathon effort for the singers. It's actually physically very, very tough, very strong. And so each act is an hour and a half. Each act of these things is an hour and a half. And the last one, you go in there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, don't come up till 12 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing thing. And in some ways, it's like being in a marathon. I've never been in a marathon, but they say once you get to the sort of certain moment, it becomes another thing. It's very true. You've sort of got to go in your pajamas because you've got to be pretty comfortable. So you've got to be tracking backs. But yes, and Suzuki likewise too, because watching a Suzuki production is very powerful. I mean, it really comes out at you. It's not like it's not bombastic, but it's very strong. Yeah. And we don't know just to watch it. And to watch the training itself is quite, it's a spiritually challenging experience. So,
and you also speak about the length of the speeches in Suzuki work. So even though Suzuki work isn't a durational piece, they're often quite short.
It's maybe about an hour and a half. I don't think I've ever seen a show that's more than an hour and a half.
Yeah. So he's just different from Wagner in that sense, but within his hour and a half, the way he sort of sculpts the actors and their speeches is very much so. There's a movement sequence, and then there's a long speech that comes from a lot of stillness in general. And then there's another sequence.
Yeah. In their own way, they're a bit of an aria.
Yeah.
Each of those speeches is quite a strong thing in itself. And it's never addressed casually. There's no throwaway lines. Everything's addressed very powerfully. And we talk about this thing called utterance. It's a fascinating thing because I think John talks about utterance as, or maybe he said it or I was saying it, that's the soul speaking. Yeah. So it's not about emotions, it's actually pre-emotional, it's sub-emotional to something about what your soul does, I guess. Now that might be an impossible thing to quantify in that sense. But I think that's what he's getting. So as you're watching this thing, there's a real communion of soul between you as the watcher and the actors doing their stuff. And then, of course, as you say, it's sculpted very strongly too. So he really projects the actors up, and he supports the actors on a very powerful mise-en-scène, choreographically, musically. They're incredibly well supported. We all know how his music is very, very, very cute in the way it actually dresses, and supports it both in terms of dark and light. Yes. I mean, a lot of people might sort of put it up, there's no chiaroscuro, there's no sort of cascades of ups and downs stuff, but he's looking at something that's far more elemental about the visceral nature of our bodies rather than the sort of the intellectual or romantic nature. I guess you could say that.
And I guess on page 81 you talk about how Wagner was really the first to give myths real weight. And, my understanding of your use of the word weight there is maybe it's to do with the gravitas, or it's with this mythicality and in the comparison between gods and man, and where you take it from there is you talk about weight, and then moving into a kind of plasma that is surrounding the audience. And that, I guess, is kind of similar to what we were talking about before with Wagner's soundscape and how it sort of surrounds you.
Yes. Wagner was also the artist's hero. He was the epitome of artist's hero. Prior to Beethoven was probably the first artist who came in the front door and says, I'm an equal with you guys who are paying my wages.
Yeah.
Mozart went in the back door. He was a tradie.
Oh.
Even though it's a very classy tradie, he was at the beck and call. But then in the 19th century, you moved to this artist as hero. You had the Beethovens, then Wagner became the pillar. No, I'm the star. I'm not just a lackey. I'm just not there to sort of make pretty stuff for you to sort of show from time to time. He forced the people to come into a theatre. He blacked out the entire stage. Prior to him, theatre and opera was more like a cabaret. You sat there chatting with your mates and a bit of somebody singing out in the corner, but he blacked the whole thing out. He sunk the audience, he sunk the orchestra under the stage. Yeah. So he forced you as an individual to deal with that on your own. You weren't chatting to people because it was black.
Yeah.
So he's the first person to do all that. And it took the whole thing from a type of entertainment to an actually,
like experiential.
A secular version of a religious experience, really. And he took that to its nth degree.
Yeah.
And then, so that's why I say get away, because you look at Mozart's equivalent to things like John Giovanni or maybe the Magic Flute, but they're very light.
Yeah.
And they're not unattractive by any means, of course, but they haven't got that density, they haven't got the gravitas, they haven't got the ballast of the darkness. And this is something he shares with Suzuki, because there's a lot of ballast in Suzuki's work. You know, the music he uses can be very light, but can also be very, very dark.
Yeah.
Have an elemental quality. So.
And when you say dark, just to expand on that, if we were to talk in terms of mythicality, there's God, there's man, and if we have the darkness too, there's also the devil and the demon, or...
I suppose demonic, yes.
Yeah.
Demonic implies darkness. I mean, demonic doesn't mean the devil per se. It doesn't mean having dark qualities. And what we mean by dark qualities, I suppose, is not badness. It's actually the same thing as, say, a tiger. When Blake is talking about tigers, they're dark.
Yeah.
They're not bad, of course.
Yeah.
But they're dark, there's dangerous, there's a sense of, something could happen. You're not going to get that with a fluffy lamb.
So again, perhaps this is something to do with the knowledge and mystery.
There's
quite. A certain amount of darkness in that mystery that you have.
Yes, and you have to have ballast. I mean, one of the reasons why a group like ABBA, which is sort of the same as the Beatles, just doesn't quite have the ballast and the density of something like the Beatles, because they haven't got John Lennon's darkness. It's all light, it's all boppy, it's all up there. Now, there's an incompleteness about that because, for instance, Lady Gaga, where she does that Bad Romance, there's darkness in that big time.
And even in just the title, Bad Romance.
Exactly. Yeah. And so she's understanding that you've got to have this tiger. You can't just have lambs all the time. You've got to have a tiger. And so that darkness is not evil by any stretch. It's not bad, but it's actually dangerous, I suppose. And maybe you're right about mystery, because mystery is bad things can happen to you quite easily for no apparent reason, and there's no gainsaying that. You can't work out why. So maybe that's what darkness is necessary, is this imminent danger, this looming danger, which is ever present in our lives. Not as present as it used to be back in the day, because you could knock it off by all sorts of diseases back then. But yes, that darkness. And it was also to do with the fact that Wagner was a hero. He said, I'm a hero.
He said it, or he was it?
He said it. He's quite happy to say it. Like I say, he had a big ego. He's quite happy to say that. And surrounded himself by people who agreed with him too.
So this is my last question about Wagner before I talk a little more about Suzuki and Kubrick. And I guess I just wanted to go a little bit deeper into what you talk about on page 83, which is Suzuki's uniqueness in the reason behind the story being something that drives his creation of an aesthetic. And does that link to the mythicality and the mythic quality? And is there something comparative that Wagner's equally doing in his
I'm not sure about that. That's a good question. I couldn't say that about Wagner. Don't know. Certainly, what was the first point made?
That Suzuki's interested in the...
Yes, because he's more interested in why the thing was written than the
Yeah.
actual writing himself. So that is mythic in itself, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
rather than sort of the chat about so-and-so doing something to so-and-so, he's more interested in why did the writer decide to shape
Yeah.
it that way, put that type of language in. And that's as true for his opera direction as it is for his theatre direction,
Yeah.
because we see the version of Traviata, as John talks about a lot, actually, very, very well.
John Brokering.
John Brokering, that is. And he talks about the fact that he actually has the writer writing the opera as the singers are singing the opera.
Yeah.
So once again, he's in that transcendent space where the writer's there. So, of course, the writer's there writing, and then the people are singing. And, of course, they're all on stage together at the same time. So it's compressed time in a way,
Yeah.
which I guess is mythological.
And he instantly creates a mythic space because there's no reality that exists with both of those things at the same time.
Correct, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Myth is kind of mythology, I suppose, because, as you say, there's no real connection between the two, and there
Yeah.
can't be, because when they're writing the opera, or play, as it turns out. And he does that a lot. He does it with Shakespeare. He does it with Cyrano, doesn't he?
Yes. Cyrano, Madame de Sade.
Madame de Sade. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not in every production. So I can't say they'd share that much much together. But I suppose in finishing, it's just that Suzuki more than anybody has a style of an aesthetic which is as thick and as weighty as Wagner's is in equivalent to music. I
Yeah.
think, and that would be the biggest connection between the two.
Yeah. So one thing that might be kind of nice to transition us with Wagner perhaps into Kubrick is you talk about how, and it's almost like an offhanded comment that you make where you say Wagner and Suzuki are both quite oppressive. And I also wonder if Kubrick could be seen in that way.
Probably would. So
And what is it about oppression that might be adding to this quality that they're able to get?
Very definitely. So we all know you've been in Tokyo. How much time have you spent in Tokyo? 2 weeks?
Yeah, 3
Well, I've
weeks.
been there off and on for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And when you leave yours feels like you've been let out of jail. And Tchaikovsky said the same thing about Wagner.
Yeah.
When he saw the ring cycle I think he saw the first ring cycle in 1881, maybe, I'm not sure. And he said, of course, he took a lot of stuff away at that too, because he wrote a lot of stuff that was sort of after Wagner, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But he said he felt like leaving jail. So it is oppressive. And of course, you're dealing with these very, very powerful human beings who are really keen to get their stuff across to you. And so they transcend entertainment to something that's far more powerful than just fun.
Yeah.
And both are very, very... And I don't know if I know of any other theatre director that sort of is up there with Wagner in terms of... Because the other thing, of course, you have to understand, we understand out there, is just how much time Suzuki's got to do stuff. He's got a company that works throughout the year, so he can actually... And I've seen 5 versions of King Lear.
Wow.
5 different, not completely different, but iterations of the same thing. So he's very capable of doing something over a very long period. So that's equivalent to the Wagner in some ways. And whilst he's quite happy to sort of reconfigure things, they still retain the core essence of the first ones we ever saw. They're also just chucked everything out with the baby out with the bathwater and started again. They're always evolutions of the same thing. And so the time that Suzuki's got to make his stuff is so significant in the way that he can mirror something like Wagner's time.
Of a performance,
Time, performance.
Time to create.
Well, Wagner wrote this stuff, it's still with us, really. It's still got that time. Whereas Suzuki's stuff, of course, is live. But,
And when you talk about oppression, is it a behavioural thing from those people? And then is it the way in which their behaviour influences other people around them? Or is it about Wagner making people sit for 20 hours to listen to an entire piece? Like, is that his version of oppression for his audience?
I'm not sure how you mean.
So, I mean, is it about the behaviour that they exhibit, or is there an oppressive nature in the performance
Oh, the
itself?
oppressive nature is saying, I know stuff, and I'm going to make you sit there long enough so you get it.
Yeah.
That's what they're both saying.
Yeah.
And you've seen the Mr. Toga piece, what's it called, Greetings?
Greetings, yeah.
And even though that's shrouded with a lot of fireworks and a
Yeah.
lot of fun stuff, there's still a serious message in there.
Yes.
And probably the chat he has after the show is about that message too. I don't know, I don't speak Japanese. But yes, it's more a nature of when you're working with somebody, and you've worked with Suzuki a little bit, I suppose you could argue, and I have too. When you are in their orbit, you're really learning so much that you won't actually understand until you actually leave it.
Yes.
As I'm sure you found out, and we've found out numerous occasions too. So, and that's oppression.
Yeah.
That's forcing them. He's
have
forcing
to,
you to really knuckle down and do what you do under his overview.
Yeah.
And it is oppressive by definition, but all forms of training are really.
Yeah.
And of course, what happens is you go back to Singapore, and there's a fluorescence about your work that happens after you've left the oppressive state. And that's happened, hasn't it? I'm sure it's happened. And certainly Jack and I could attest to that too. So it's important to go through that. Yeah. Because that's how you actually are sort of moulded into some new version of yourself. Yeah. Whereas if you're just allowed to have fun, of course it's a holiday. Yeah. It's hard work. Very hard work. Really.
Lots of hard work.
It's hard work.
Okay, so moving on to talk about Kubrick, you start by really saying that you're not necessarily trying to compare the way their work looks, but you're trying to compare their creative attitudes. And so this is really how I've sort of summarized it into their process, the way they create work. And one of the first things that you talk about is how Kubrick is both a scientist and an artist. And I wondered, does Suzuki also have that kind of parallel? Like, is he a politician and an artist?
He's certainly a politician.
Yeah.
Well, he's very successful politically.
Yes.
We all know that, because you see these grandees come to Toga and just don't sort of worship his feet or anything, but he's got this incredible complex. Every year a brand new building goes up.
Yeah.
And, we're talking millions of dollars in Japan, so a lot of money. So he doesn't. I'm sure he pays attention politically and does the right thing.
And is there something in their personalities that being able to encompass both artist and other allows them to go into these other realms? Is it a duality of personality?
Oh, I guess so. I don't know. The thing about Kubrick, in a way, is he's American, and then some stage he decamped to London and did all of his work, and he lived not 5 miles from the studio, so he never travelled again. And they say that Kubrick's sets were very small. I mean, they were big sets, but you only had 5 people there. You didn't have like 70 or 80 gophers running around shifting things. It was very quiet. And he spent a lot of time on stuff. Yeah. And he was of such a significant reputation that some people like Warner Brothers would just say, yeah, go ahead and do it. We know it, we can trust you, things like that. So Suzuki's done the same sort of thing, because there's several times when Suzuki's could have gone big and famous, and he's actually pulled back. Yeah. I've watched it, and it must have happened before my time too. He's had a chance to do something big, and he's actually decided, no, I'm going to go back into the garage and just muck around myself. So big similarities there, where both of them were sucked into sort of becoming high and mighty. And Kubrick was just renowned for his ability to just concentrate on one little thing. 273 takes to open a door. Yeah. On 128, actually, that's the record. He did 128 takes. 128 takes. So is that answering your question about Kubrick?
Well, I guess I have a follow-up question, which is, I wonder, when you make this point about Kubrick being a scientist and an artist, is it that he is a scientist and an artist, or is this an insight of yours because you're kind of a scientist and an artist?
That's true. I can't help it. Yes, I suppose I'm not in any way the same. I mean, Kubrick really understood lenses, and he understood light, and he understood the nuts and bolts of how to make films. He really understood light. He was actually a very famous photographer in the 50s before he became a film director. So he comes from a sort of a person who understands the camera and the way it works, and the way, not just the way it sees, but the way it actually takes light and can work it out. So when he just, I think when he did 2001, he somehow commandeered this film company to give him these amazing lenses. They don't know how they did it, they don't know why they let him have it, but they did. And then he got a guy to bolt them together in another type of camera. So he really understood the technique of stuff. And I wouldn't say Suzuki understands that, although he does understand lighting very well. He understands all the stage mechanics. But I don't think it goes to the level of how lights work so much as just understanding how lights, the effect of lights.
Yes.
And I say that. But although I say that the aesthetics, but a Kubrick film still looks like a Kubrick film.
Yes.
It has a lot of time in it.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, true of Suzuki's work too. So, and Kubrick was just relentless. He would ask for a whole series of photographs of a streetscape and then just spend hours looking at each house. There's a famous story that somebody said, he said, we need a pad. We need a pad to write this down. He says, now go out and get a stack of pads. No, don't just get 2, get 10. And he says, no, don't just get 10, but go to 10 different shops and get all the pads they've got. And then he said, no, don't just go to 10 shops. Go to a whole city. I mean, it just got bigger and bigger, just over one pad. So I mean, you're talking about someone who we would consider completely eccentric and obsessive, but that's how he got his stuff, really.
And so on page 86, you talk about erosion of the ego. And this is, I guess for me, this is a concept I feel like I understand because I've experienced the training. I've experienced a moment where I feel that I am not performing with ego or allowing it to control.
One of the things about this training that we do is it gives you these insights into how these people get their stuff.
Yeah. And the two main ways you really pull out is repetition and going into the minutiae. These are two things that you think both Kubrick and Suzuki really do. Yes.
Well, Kubrick, like I said, is renowned for doing, I think, 128 takes for one scene in The Shining. It's the sign in which she's, I guess, attacked by what it is anyway, it doesn't matter. But there's another, it's an interesting thing. One of the sequences, I might talk about it in the book, I'm not sure, but I talk about Jack Nicholson walking down the corridor.
Yep,
so
that's in here.
That's part of that repetition too, because apparently, I don't know, I can't read Kubrick's mind, so I can't really know. But I look at the way Suzuki rehearses, and he's incredibly perspicacious about what he's looking for. So he'll watch a whole run through of Madame Dessart and just shift a little foot one way, so no, the toe should be there. Or he'll sort of change everything. So you just don't know what he's going to do. And he really does work again and again and again, and he doesn't mark. So all the actors do everything flat out.
Yeah.
And you haven't seen this, but we've seen him rehearse dance pieces, because he loves dance pieces. He loves the movement sequences. He will always rehearse those actually instead of the acting, I reckon. Not surprising, because they're always very, very buoyant and very, very compelling. But we saw him one night he got Shohara and Takamori to come out and do their solos from two different plays. One was Kachikachiyama, in which Shohara was playing the Tanaki, the sort of the bad guy. He came out with one boot on, did this amazing solo, and I swear it was a piece of idiosyncratic dance I've never seen the like. He must have done it 12 times.
Whoa.
And this is at 1 o'clock in the morning, having done a whole stack of shows.
And he's not a 20-year-old actor.
And he's not 20, he's not a young 20-year-old. And we're talking about like doing it flat out 12 times. Now, you wouldn't get a Westerner to do that. No. Full stop. You would not, we wouldn't be capable of it. We're just not like that. So you're looking at a sort of a type of acuity and a type of, just wearing it down, wearing it down, wearing it down. And I think Kubrick does that with film, because he wears out because there's a famous story about an actor who went to work with Kubrick on Eyes Wide Shut, and they were doing something and he took 3 takes, it was fine. Because, what's everybody talking about, all these long takes? The next day he did like 130 takes of him opening the door, literally just opening the door. But I think there's a very good reason behind that, because I look at, and this is the same with Suzuki, and I'm talking about same and different in the book as well, because there's an amazing shot in The Shining where Kubrick's walking down the corridor, sort of towards the camera. He's about to turn left into this room to have this conversation with the bartender. And as he's walking down the corridor, he's sort of really cross because he's going mad. And he does this amazing with his shoulders. And you can't tell whether he's annoyed with Kubrick because he's had so many takes, or whether he's annoyed with himself because he can't get it right, or whether there's anything like that at all. Now, Nicholson wasn't averse to the whole process. He didn't mind it at all, apparently, because he certainly never says he objected to it. So I think Kubrick's looking, at 20 different versions of that walk and turn, and then he's waiting for the one that's still got this other funny, little,
mystery,
amazing, mysterious thing. And this shrug's almost, you'd miss it if you didn't look for it. It's not a big seat, just not flashing lights. But it's that funny little thing that makes you go, oh wow, what's going on there?
He's not just walking down a hall.
And so I think
there's knowledge. We know he's walking down the hall.
We know he's walking down the hall, and there's this mysterious thing that just happens as a sort of almost like a blip.
Yeah.
And I hazard a guess that that's what Kubrick's waiting for. That's the one I want. That's it. That's got this thing that I don't get myself.
Yeah.
And I've seen Suzuki do that too, I think.
Yeah.
I've certainly seen him repeat again. And then he does things like at the play that I was in, which was Dionysus, he has these 6 priests, and they walk in a circle to surround Pentheus. And 5 of them work one way, and the other one, only one walks the other way. And I'm not sure that I would have noticed had I watched hundreds of rehearsals.
Yeah.
And did he put that in deliberately, or was that just a piece of luck? I don't know.
And in your book, you call that a subliminal interdiction.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes, I've forgotten that. But yes, I think it is. And I think that's the same but different, that mysterious thing that...
And when you say subliminal as well, in what way do you mean subliminal?
I mean, you hardly notice it.
It's hardly noticeable. Is it about its non-purposefulness? Like perhaps he didn't ask Jack Nicholson to do a shrug as he walked down the hallway? I mean, we're never going to know, but...
No. Yes. I mean subliminal sense, it's there in the back of your brain because you see it, but you don't actually recognise it in overt terms.
Okay.
And we only noticed this 5-to-1 relationship, I'm probably having watched it 60 or 70 times. So I only suddenly noticed it. And I never, maybe we should ask Suzuki.
Yeah.
But both of them do this amazing thing. And then Kubrick wears out the actor, of course, because 50 takes. He's wearing out the technicians too, because they've got to concentrate on this thing. I think he's wearing out the ego of the film.
Yeah.
To take it to a much more thing. And I think Suzuki does the same thing too. So he wears it out.
Yeah.
He wears out your ego. He forces you, actually, because I've had this happen to me, he doesn't want to see your ego on stage. He goes nuts if he sees people's egos. He just goes mental. But he wants to see yourself.
Yeah.
So one of the things about the training and one of the things about working with Suzuki, he forces you to become yourself, to reveal yourself. Not the thing you want to be, not the thing you should be, or the thing you should be, but the thing you are. And that's a very easy thing to say. But he does it through ablation, just through exhaustion.
I mean, can you talk us through the process that you went through with Suzuki? Is there a moment in time you can talk about, like an exact experience during rehearsals with Suzuki? Like, what was going through your head? What was the process?
Well, I didn't have an interview, so I had nobody who could intercede with me with Suzuki. My interview ran away the night of our first rehearsal, so and from then I never had...
No translator,
No translator. And I think it's good in a way because I just had to figure it out myself.
Yeah.
I had tremendous physical ability to do the training. But in terms of acting, I wasn't that experienced an actor at all. In fact, I'd never spoken before this. And he really got me to do the role of Banquo's ghost in the Macbeth thing, which was with the Melbourne...
The Chronicles with Playbox,
Chronicle with Playbox. Really because of my ability to come on and look pretty impressive as Banquo's ghost. I had this phenomenal costume, a sword, tremendous music, massive costume. So it's probably the best costume in the whole play. So he actually hired me for my physicality, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess he wanted to see how that would transpose into a vocal quality or whatever. He just tried all sorts of things really with me. The only time I thought I knew I got it right in one rehearsal, which was actually in the second time, because I spent 2 periods with him. And I think he understood. It's very hard to tell.
Yeah.
because when you're rehearsing with Suzuki, you're sort of hiding in a way because he wants to go through the stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're sort of sleeping because the Japanese do a lot of that when they can. They sort of sleep like this, so they're all sort of awake and sleeping. And you're sort of holding yourself back so he doesn't look on you because
Don't make eye contact.
That's right. I need to work with you. And you can easily get up there and spend 4 minutes and you go, that's fine. Or you can spend 45 minutes and sitting statues just going through the same thing again and again and again. So you had no idea what was in store. You really had no idea what he was after, actually.
I mean, again, it comes back to mystery. So is it inherent in the relationship that Suzuki creates with the performers in rehearsal too?
Oh, absolutely.
That there's
quite.
You know you need to be there. You know there will be rehearsal. You know
and
know
you
your
know that
lines,
you might just spend 3 hours not do anything, or the rehearsals never go on for too long. They never go more than 3 hours, as far as I've ever had. And he might spend an hour and a half talking about one word to one of the actors while they're holding
an extreme standing statue.
Yeah, I mean, 45 minutes this kid was holding this position while Suzuki was talking to somebody else about something else. I mean, this is really, you don't see this anywhere else in your life. I mean, it's a God space.
Yeah.
Not he's a God, that's a stupid thing to say. But you're getting into a space where
it's beyond
human.
A quotidian,
Yeah, it's beyond data, it's beyond human stuff. It's alien, effectively. And likewise, he'll just, and I've seen people knock sets over, he doesn't care. They'll do some little infringement and he'll go nuts.
Yeah.
And you can't work in. He'll have somebody at the door and he'll berate her for 45 minutes because she forgot to bring the bag with her. It's incredible. I mean, it's amazing energy.
Yeah.
And paradoxically, the actors are always worried that he'll lose energy. The greatest fear was he won't have the energy. So they don't see that even the same sort of egotistical way, do you?
Yeah.
They don't. Although, they're as susceptible to not being able to come up with the goods because he's relentless.
Yeah.
He's really, really relentless. And he just doesn't ever, ever, ever give up as far as I can see. And that's an incredibly admirable trait.
Yeah.
Because it's very, very unique.
He's just as committed to eroding the egos and spending the time, and he'll sit there for longer than you can stand up.
And you don't know why he's doing it. I've heard other stories too. But we went to see a version of Madame de Sade back in 1914, I think. Must have been 14 or something. And we tried to get him there because John broke his.
You mean 2014?
2014, sorry.
Yeah. How old are you?
I'm not that old. Anyway, so we were in there. We came into town. It's about Tuesday, so the actually opening night's Friday. We were going to go and see his house to sort of talk about something, but he wasn't here. Damn it! We'll go back to the compound. Go to the compound. The minute the car stops, his personal assistant Narichan comes racing across the quadrangle and says, "Quick, rehearsal's about to start." Oh, right, okay. So just jump out of the car, race across, and take our shoes off, walk in, and the whole theatre's dark. Suzuki's sitting there with his sound up, his penciler, his PA, so to speak. He sort of nods to us to say, "Great to see you," and then he sort of, and the whole show starts, right? And it's perfect. It's like an hour and 15 minutes of like a jewel in a box. Now we're just staggered because we're not VIPs by any stretch, and if we weren't there, he'd still have the rehearsal.
It would still happen. Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. After 40 or 50 years of fame and fortune, he's just in the garage, right onto it, completely onto every little nut and bolt.
Up in some mountain village.
At some middle of nowhere on a sunny afternoon,
Japanese
people driving past. It's astonishing. It's just amazing. And I don't think of I can't think of anybody. I certainly couldn't even imagine doing that. Of just having that incredible perspective back in the garage, onto it. And of course, he loves to have people there to see the show because he needs an audience too and likes to have people. He doesn't care, but he's happy for us to see it because that's another way of viewing it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just gobsmacked.
Yeah.
Absolutely gobsmacked. I've never seen it like it.
So another connection you make between Suzuki and Kubrick's approach to content is their ability to turn sex and violence into something more poetic or something more metaphorical.
Fantastic. Fantasy, yes.
And I guess I wanted to hear you talk a little bit more. One of the examples you give in the book on page 88 is from Cyrano, and it's the men with the katanas.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's extraordinary piece of choreography. Suzuki's a pretty amazing choreographer, even though he's never studied with anything. So you've got these guys sitting on the little tatami mats, and they're sort of munching on their rice balls. He loves to have food in his shows. And next to him are these very pretty girls in wedding kimonos who are looking, they're pristine. They look like porcelain, alabaster porcelain. So they're very pale, probably got white makeup on. Got the short sort of kimonos, so they're sort of sexy too.
Yeah.
In a very, very fairy quality.
Like dolls or something.
Like dolls,
yeah.
exactly. So they're sitting there, they've got these parasols, and they've got sort of lace gloves, and they've got the lace, even maybe lace fascinators on. You know, the guys are there, and of course they're sort of dressed in classic black, sort of, samurai kimono.
Samurai, yeah.
So they're sitting down, and the drinking song, which is the famous piece of Libbiamo from Traviata, the guys get up and they start brandishing the swords and leering and they're sort of like dribbling and all sorts of really over-the-top stuff.
Yeah.
And the girls, meanwhile, just slowly sort of rise on their chairs. And you think the guys, not only are they going to rape them or have sex with them, they're going to rape them, they're going to kill them, they're going to destroy them physically. You think all this, it's just, how can this not happen? Because there's energy the boys are making, and yet the girls are completely oblivious, and they're just rising above the whole thing. And actually, at the end of the day, nothing happens.
Yeah.
So, which is a famous metaphor, because the play itself is about impotence.
Yeah.
Because the great poet actually can't get it up.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. So it's a phenomenal metaphor. And what he's done is he's separated the sexual archetypes, if you like, or stereotypes, if you want to say, and separate them fully, completely. So the women sort of feminised there and the men masculinised there. But, so he separated the sexualities, they dimorphed them massively. But then the guys and the girls do it with such amazing conviction that you've got this incredible sort of dialectic between the activity and the abstracted nature of the experience. It's a fantastic piece of choreography.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant piece, and the Lord knows how he even thinks of it. And so he's got that ability to abstract it, and I guess I compare it with Kubrick's way of doing the same thing, because he's got the, what do I say in the book? Is it about the sex scene?
You talk about the sex scene and the rape scene from...
Oh yes, the sex scene in
Clockwork Orange.
Yeah. This guy picks up two dolly birds at the local record shop, they go back and have sex, and so of course he shoots the whole thing in long shot, so you don't see any nasty bits. And the girls, but it's all done at probably about 10 times speed.
Yeah.
So that's super fast. So it's as funny as a fit.
Yeah.
And it's not threatening. It's not even, well, it's not certainly not pornographic or erotic. It's funny, and you can get the idea what they're doing. But it's also extremely funny as the sex act can be out of context. And then the rape, the murder scene in later on in the film is actually done in the same way. It's abstracted away too.
Yeah.
In fact, I think he kills the lady with this big model of a penis. It's not a real model, but it's sort of like abstract. It's got the same sort of shape, and the balls at the bottom, but it's been sort of smoothed out, so it doesn't look anything like a real thing.
Again, like a doll penis instead of like Ken or something.
Yes, yeah, and big, and it's just got the vague shape, so there's no wrinkles, there's no skin cut, it's all white, it's completely smooth. But that's what he does that, so I get the...
Like a sterile but sexuality.
Sterile but sexuality, and of course he's abstracted, so it becomes fantastic violence rather than real violence. There's no blood, there's no... It's a horrifying, I mean, it's a scary film in a way, and he pulled it from distribution because he was horrified at the reaction it got.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't see it for about 20 years until after he died. But that idea of abstracting things like sex and violence away from the reality, because the reality of sex is just really funny, it's ludicrous.
Yeah.
You can't do it without all these issues on stage. The minute you say F-U-C-K, then people just start to giggle. And you've just lost them, really, and they're either spooked because they can't stand the idea or they think it's funny. So he's done this thing. The way he kisses in Cyrano is very beautiful, because he often plays, I think, I've seen Roxanne played by a woman. I've seen it sort of played by a man. Now, the man's not gay and it's not effeminate, but he is thin.
Yeah.
And so as he gets up, they get up onto the stage, they go into the little sort of slidey screen, little Japanese hut thing, And he closes the door and they start to turn and kiss at the same time. And it's incredible. You can't work out which way they're turning. And it's all done in shadow.
Yeah.
So it has this consummation. And that's, of course, the sex act, really.
Yeah.
That's the metaphor for the actual act of consummation of this relationship. And it's done in such an elegant, poetic fashion. It's completely what's the word? Unshocking, threatening.
There's no
you're not sick
overt and
it's not overt at all. There's no
realistic
there's no realism.
There's no nudity or
there's no nudity, nothing like that. So he eschews all those sort of things which are sort of dodgy because and Kubrick does the same sort of thing by abstracting them away from the reality and either surrendering to the type of music or a visual quality. Because when you see the Kubrick stuff, it's all done massive long shot.
Yeah.
Massive long shot. So it's like in a room 50 metres away. So it's rendered funny.
Yeah.
And away, but yet you know what's happening.
Yes.
So they share that very much, really. And I think Suzuki does it because he's saying this is not realism, this is never realism. Although it's artifice, he's saying it's actually about spiritual issues.
Yes.
And so when he's talking about sex, he's talking about the spiritual nature of sexuality rather than the ordinary, daily.
And when you say the spiritual nature of sexuality, do you mean like connection between people or...
Or female and male essence.
Yeah.
Because the female and male essence, you have to have the male essence and the female essence to actually conceive and have children.
To create
hence
life.
Procreate. Because the male essence is essentially the sperm, which has no content, it only has form, and the egg, which is all content and no form. And of course, the egg can't exist until the sperm's inseminated, fertilised, sorry.
Yeah.
But so the egg is nothing. It's all potential until the sperm comes on. But the sperm itself isn't anything itself.
Yeah.
So with that, the two principles. So I guess he's taking sex to mean the sort of conjoining of the principles of masculinity and femininity rather than men and women having sex.
Yeah.
So it's abstracted away to the idea, and the idea, of course, is congruent with everything in every art. It's all about sex, really, isn't it? Well, dancing's about sex, but it's sort of consummated in such a way, or treated in such a way as it's not obvious. And all great stories about men and women sort of coming together and losing each other, finding themselves again.
Yeah.
Every opera's about that.
Yeah.
Every play's about that, really, more mostly. So he's taken an essence of something, I guess, and what he does with this essence, he abstracts it away so it's completely abstract away from any sort of realistic thing. But the actors do it with such amazing
extreme conviction
definition and conviction, exactly, that you're caught in this amazing combination of semantic, if you like, or ethereal, and reality. And they're widely separated, but they sort of come together because of the power of the two ideas.
Yeah.
And you don't really get, of course, you get time to see it in Suzuki stuff too, because there's time there. There's a lot of stuff that's so busy with other things you couldn't see that anyway. You have to imagine. But here it's actually physically realised as well. It's realised in sort of a real state rather than just intellectualised.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've seen the same thing.
Yeah.
Say, it's there, it's sticking out.
Yeah.
It's there. It's not just my idea. It's not just Suzuki's idea. It's actually happening on the deck.
Yeah.
So that's something they share.
And so there's this this other issue you talk about that Kubrick, we're on page 90, and Kubrick was finding it very difficult to make the scenes, the rape scene is what you're talking about, to make it look convincing.
I think they rehearsed for 3 or 4 days.
How to make it look real when it's not real. And I guess it's this approach that causes it, but how do you make something look real without actually raping someone or without actually murdering someone?
You can't actually have those things happening on stage. You can't do it either on stage or film because it's just not, you can't keep, etc. It's obvious what that is. Well, I guess, once again, you have to abstract it because the closer you get to the type of reality, the more it becomes a joke and more it becomes something that can be easily dismissed, the more it can be something that actually alienates the whole swag of the people watching.
Yeah.
Like we know that when you have sex on stage, half the people just can't deal with it. And the other half just start laughing and giggling because you've lost them, really. So I guess the only thing you do is to abstract it away and then work out what can connect the abstract with the real.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the scene in Kubrick's
Clockwork
Orange, where Alex rapes and kills the woman. Yes. And Kubrick had been rehearsing this for 3 or 4 days and just couldn't work out how to make it work because, of course, he get this funny stuff with people punching and all this groping and stuff. And he just didn't know what to do. And I think it was 3 or 4 days rehearsal we're talking about. And he just said, well, do you know any songs? Can you sing something? And Mark McDowell, he can't sing.
Yeah.
He's quite happy to say that. He says, well, the only song I know is Singing in the Rain. I can't sing. He says, well, who cares? Let's just try it. And he started doing this weird version, which is what we see in the film. And Kubrick apparently went straight out and bought the rights to it, unbeknown to, was it Gene Kelly, who owned the rights to it, who was horrified, of course. And then just took this thing. So you see this bizarre thing of this man sort of trying to sing Singing in the Rain, which, of course, is quite grotesque in the context. Quite wicked, really.
Yes.
So once again, you get this wicked context, don't you? You get a wicked context, but actually it's in an unwicked situation because the song itself's not wicked.
Yes.
And so you get this amazing thought of this wicked activity, and yet it's not a wicked thing happening because there's no violence at all, and there's certainly no blood. There's no gallons of blood splashing around. It's all completely. It's all done by people. Sort of when she's being attacked, you sort of get this look. You get that thing. You don't get the actual. I don't think you even see them.
I don't think you do. Yeah.
I don't think you see any activity. So of course it's all fantasy, and it's all done in the mind of the observer because the observer's watching something and hearing something else which is totally counter-indicative of the experience. And I guess that makes it seem much more wicked.
Yes. Because it allows the viewer to imagine it, to create it, because they know what's happening.
And they know it's happening, and then they know, and yet what they see and what they hear is two different things too.
Yeah.
So there's got to be something about that. I'm not sure what that means even. But yes. And Suzuki does the same sort of thing. I suppose what's my example in the book? Have I got an example?
With Suzuki. Where are we? Yeah, I mean, it's in the book, page 91, you talk about Suzuki's use of Elvis in Kachi Kachiyama. I think it's also, I mean, Suzuki does it quite a lot, like having, even Traviata is the sequence that the rape in Cyrano happens to, isn't it? Or is it Drinking Song?
That's the Drinking Song from Traviata, quite right. It's a beautiful song. It's got lovely da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's a beautiful, well, I think it's a waltz. Yes, and Suzuki uses great appositeness, and once again, the genius of Kubrick, and he was the first person ever to do this, as far as I know, in the film Clockwork Orange, is to find the song that's completely opposite to what's actually happening. Now, it's one thing to sort of course, what we nearly always see is the song is the same as the activity, which, of course, is just piling on the same stuff.
Yes.
He takes this opposite thing, and the first person, I'm sure the first person to really do it, I certainly cannot think of something I've seen, and I've seen a lot of stuff. And Suzuki will do the same thing too. So he uses "Don't Be Cruel," which is an Elvis Presley song, which is pretty naff.
Yeah.
And he has the bunny rabbits dancing to it in this strange thing, which then became part of the training. Funny enough. And it's funny to watch, and it's silly. And I can give numerous examples of the way Suzuki's done that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's just to point up something. And you've seen "Springtime in the North," which is an amazing piece of music, isn't it? That's a song that he's made a play out of, isn't it?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't really know much about the song, but I think it was either a song or a poem that was the inspiration for the piece "Springtime in the North" that turned into a play.
As I've said, he's very keen on. Well, he's got an extraordinary eclectic vision of the way music works. One of the things he's done is he uses Enka, he uses classical and Japanese pop songs. But then he also uses things like in Waiting for Romeo, he uses the Carpenters singing a song called Yesterday Once More, which is both incredibly surrealistic and also really naff.
Yeah.
I mean, how does he find these things? Then the music he uses for talking about ballast, we're talking about the music he uses for Dionysus and Macbeth is a thing called Burnt Garden by a man I think called Carlos Chavez. It's impossible to find this music. And he apparently found it when he was in Finland and saw a Finnish ballet company using that music and asked to use it, so he's using it. Don't know what that means. But that's an extraordinary piece of music.
Yeah.
The darkness and that sort of that louche quality that it does have. You know, the music we use for training is the Blue Velvet Girls. Pink Room. What's his name? David Lynch. He uses that, and that's got that dangerous, lurching, sort of slightly drunk and about to sort of fall over quality. And Suzuki uses this amazing music. Now, I've worked with music of Vangelis in a ballet I was in many years ago in Adelaide. And Vangelis sort of sounds like this, but this has got a darkness Vangelis never has. And how does Suzuki find this stuff? And then I've seen him rehearsing with an amazing song like Haratachi Karatachi, and then he says, put on punk, and they put on Public Image Limited, which is not really punk, actually, it's post-punk, but that's not the point. And so I see this completely different music, and he'll see the same stuff and array it or surround it by a sound which is completely opposite.
Yeah.
He uses Chubby Checker for Let's Twist Again. Which is even sillier song than the original, which is Let's Do the Twist.
Yeah.
So, and he'll have the girls doing these really quite savage, stabbing type stuff. Yeah. And it's very funny, and of course it's cute at the same time.
Stab, die, stand up, repeat. Yeah.
That's right. And we're seeing it all the time, not only in the training, but in the shows themselves. So extraordinary ability to either find music which then that condenses the stuff, or find music which completely sort of unlocks it by sort of decoding it somehow. And I mean, we've copied that idea, we've used that idea a lot since, because it's just such a phenomenal starting point. And I'm sure in your work you're doing that too. You're finding music's not just the same again, which is just pile on, but what's the opposite stuff? What's the other story? What's the mystery?
Yeah. Because
I guess you could argue when you see a guy kicking somebody and then singing King, there's a huge mysterious gulf, isn't there, between, I know that song. Singing in the Rain's a very famous song from a musical in 1938. And it's a very, very upbeat, very pleasant.
Very happy.
Very happy. So to see this context, there's something to do with this corkscrewing, isn't it? As it sort of winds in, as it takes the thing and then pulls it out. And there's something about what that happens to you. That happens to your mind as you're watching it, doesn't it?
And you try to make sense of it when you're watching it as a viewer. You try to think, well, why is he singing this song while he's doing this horrific act? And how can the two coexist? Because if I was doing that horrific act, I probably wouldn't be singing in the rain.
That's right.
So again, there's that mystery, and what is actually going through his head that allows him to be singing this thing while he's doing this thing?
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe he's sort of identifying with the sort of the screwed up nature of his head, because he's a psychopathic idiot or whatever. And so you're looking at
and again, is he showing the psychopathic nature of this person's existence in the use of juxtaposing action and song?
I guess that is. I mean, it's not normal behaviour.
No.
So he's found a way to realise.
He's found a very simple way to encapsulate it that people are able to interpret as well.
And to feel.
Yeah.
And to feel, and then as you feel it, because you do feel this powerful disjunction between the sight and the sound, and then there's the feeling, isn't it, which is, I guess, the combination of the two things.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So, how does he do it? I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he does it. It's the training, but that's another story.
Yeah. So I guess I'm getting towards the end here, but we might have kind of answered this question already, but I did want to... there are other, I guess, I know of a film director who really likes and wants things to look as realistic as possible. And maybe, like in many ways, that's the purpose of film, that you're able to make things look realistic.
Or hyper-realistic.
Hyper-real.
Yeah.
In a way that you can't with the theatre.
No.
You can make someone's death look real on film, but you can't make someone's death look real in theatre.
No. No, you're quite right. Well, you've got the close-up and the long shot.
Close-ups in particular.
To say something's really supposed to look like that, which you can't really do in life.
Yeah. And I've there was a story I heard of a film director who there was a scene where a woman was being choked to death, and the film director wanted it to look real. And every time the actor choked the woman, he didn't really choke her. He was just holding her neck, and she was having to act, which is an actor's job. And the film director wasn't happy with the way it kept looking. And so he sort of spoke to the actress and said, is it okay if I really choke you and you pass out and you just trust me that I won't kill you? And
The director said this.
The director said this. And the actress sort of agreed and went through with it, and she got choked out and she didn't die. So I guess, a happy ending. But when a director is looking for a realism of that kind, which, is not really going to be possible in the theatre. You couldn't actually be being choked out every night if you were running a show for a season, no matter how short your season. So what is it about being able to, instead of trying to become hyper-real or hyper real.
Yeah, super real, yeah.
What is it about being able to abstract it into a poetic or a metaphoric image, or separate these things, like the musical juxtaposition is the wording you use? What about that makes it more impactful than that reality?
Much more impactful. I tell the story, it might be in this book, where when I was a young man growing up in Adelaide, instead of giving you a fine, they made you watch these films.
Oh, yeah.
And the films were sort of quite graphic. They had people cutting brains and stuff that was alcoholic and all sorts of stuff, prangs and stuff. So you drove home about 5 miles an hour, suitably chased and something like that. But the next day, it's straight back to normal.
Yeah.
And they only did this for a couple of years because they realised it wasn't going to have any effect. And I realised that what happened was that you had no say in the way you were digesting the food. You were literally rammed down your throat.
Yeah.
And so I thought then, well, that's a fail, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you actually have to allow the audience to make up their own minds about what they want to take in and how they want to take it in. So this idea is completely pointless.
Yeah.
That's just forcing your ego, your conscious intentions on them. And I tell you, most people just go, well, actually, I don't want that. I didn't pay for that. I want to pay what I want to see. I don't want what you want me to see. I want what I want to see. So, of course, this plurality of having this lens distortion of the difference between one reality and another reality is far more effective.
Yeah.
Because you're allowing the audience to actually make up their own version rather than sort of be told what to think. Nobody wants to be told what to think.
Yeah.
And so, apart from the dangerous quality, what if she goes too far and she dies? Well, that's not a good look.
Yeah.
So, oops. And all for no purpose, really. And it's interesting because Chelsea is a piece we did in Hobart. We filmed a man called Anthony Artaud, who's a wild man of French.
Theatre of cruelty.
Something, very innocent guy, but also fruitful. And at one stage, Chelsea dresses as a nun. And she comes on stage, and I'm playing things. She sort of sits, not on my face, but on a pillow behind me, but does look as though she's sitting on my face. And it's all very got great decorum. Then she takes her clothes off to reveal a bra and knickers, so she doesn't really strip. But the whole thing is a very powerful experience. It's very powerful visually, but not for anything that Chelsea actually did, but for the context that Jackie, the director, had put her in. So it was a fantastic insight into sort of an erotic potential inside that situation. But you yourself never had to undergo through it. You just had to sort of walk through it. I don't know what happened to you what happened to you when you were doing that stuff. What went through your mind?
I think a lot of the stuff that went through my mind, there was a really beautiful piece of music being played. So I remember I used to listen to the music. Like I was sort of, of course I was performing, but I was also, because of the sound, I was able to be a listener, just like everybody else. And the lights were really bright, and they used to kind of blind me a little bit. And so there was something about trying to breathe in all of the light energy that I could. And so I think a lot of my experience was about allowing the sound and the lighting, and even like the going from wearing the nun's outfit to not wearing the nun's outfit. You can feel the air conditioning on your skin very differently. So it becomes about how all of those physical things that are really happening affect a feeling inside and what that changes about you. And I don't think I can put a name on the feeling.
No. The point was that she didn't have to be sexy. She just had to be Chelsea, just going through a series of very straightforward actions, really.
And again, like in the way that there's a juxtaposition, there's two very powerful female images, and one is that of a nun, and the other is really, I guess, a femme fatale, or like even a stripper.
Whore, courtesan, stripper.
Courtesan, yeah.
Yeah, all of those. Yeah, the two archetypes actually bouncing off
yeah.
each other, aren't they? Really, and I guess also merging too, because an attractive woman could be both of those things.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, and that's what you're talking about in a way. So instead of realism, you go for this anti-realism,
yeah.
and then of course the audience, and there's nothing in there that could actually offend anybody. I mean, it's not. I suppose you could be a bit concerned about seeing a nun like that, but it's not as though it was actually. I mean, if you're taking your clothes right off, that could be offensive.
Yeah.
But the fact that you and your underwear was actually quite modest.
It was fairly
really.
well covered, yeah.
It was very well covered. So I doubt we didn't hear nobody sort of bat an eyelid about it. Really, I suppose some people could have, but you had to be fairly extreme on that side of the social divide to actually take that offensively. And that was quite deliberate on our part too, because it's just no point alienating a section of your public because you don't get them back.
Yeah. So my final question is on page 91, and we've talked about this, but I thought it might be a nice way to wrap up. Sorry. You talk about by adding the sound or the song, that the song has this tactile quality that's over and above its musical quality.
Mm-hmm.
And that this densifies the whole picture by giving it a mythical charisma. And I guess we've talked about this in terms of Wagner, but now we're talking about it in terms of the way Suzuki and Kubrick use music too. That it's not just a song like every other, but that there's a tactile or a physical quality to the sound that takes it somewhere else. And whether or not that's something on top of, or if it's something completely separate and different that then pulls two things together.
I think both Suzuki and Kubrick use music that is incredibly well matched internally with itself. Like if you look at a song, like the beginning of 2001 is actually Richard Strauss's Ozfrank, Zarathustra, which is a very famous piece of music, and that's the beginning of 2001.
Yeah.
But all of the music they both choose has got tremendous intelligence in their content, or at least, or maybe stupidity, because there's other songs he used for their stupidity. But there's a match between the sound and the texture and the rhythm and the content. And both Suzuki and Kubrick are very keen to find songs that actually have a lot of inner coherence, shall we say. And when you hear a song which also then matches something you're watching, but then the sound of the song matches something, and the feeling of the song matches the thing, you get this tremendous sort of doubling up of everything. So that starts to sort of multiply. The effect is the multiplier effect.
Yeah.
Because this thing multiplies.
Yeah. And so you talk about mythical charisma. And so now again, like, are we talking about a similar kind of mythicality that we spoke about with Wagner? And when we talk about charisma, is that to do with a plasma?
Oh, that's a good question. I think they're all great songs that have got mythical power. If you look at Imagine by John Lennon, it's become a myth, and those great songs become myths in and of themselves, don't they?
Yeah.
Really. And that's a charismatic. That's a charisma that actually. Well, what's the definition of charisma?
Yeah, difficult.
Well, I say the definition of charisma is when the person. If you're talking about a person has got charisma when their sense of who they are is much bigger than their physical space.
So self-definition that extends beyond the
their physical boundaries. So that Parkinson talked about the charismatic people he's had on his show. He said that they all seem to fill, the personalities seem to fill the room.
Yeah.
And that was a definition of charisma. That your sense of Chelseaness actually goes this far and goes through the camera into the mind of the thing.
And into the viewer too.
Into the viewer, exactly. And it occupies the space between your physical boundary and those who are watching you. So I think that's charisma.
Yeah.
And it's so if a song's got charisma or mythical, and of course that's mythicality because this guy's larger than life. You talk about Nelson Mandela or Orson Welles, Richard Burton, Muhammad Ali, there were 4 he spoke of, and they all seem larger than life. That's the other expression they use, isn't it? They're bigger than life.
Larger than life, yeah.
You know, their personalities fill the room. There's a whole, and so they're talking about a visceral quality or a physical quality which transcends, you know, their image, the way their arms end. So I don't see why a song can't have that. I mean, all songs are essentially myths anyway, because the music, the sound of melody is a myth.
I mean, it's interesting too, almost in a way that perhaps the song is another actor. You know, if you were to put it in simple terms, is that the way it's functioning in the space? It's not just the sound effect to support something. It's actually working with and against.
Well, you see, a sound effect has no obvious character. It's got a half a character, but a song itself has a character. When you listen to any song that you know well or love, it will give you the whole stack of images which are way beyond the sound, way beyond the content, way beyond the style of the person singing. So a sound effect has only got like a quarter of that potential, and it hasn't got its own personality, because a song has a separate personality, a separate and unique personality, born of being around for a long time and having a lot of people love it.
Yeah.
And so once you juxtapose that, then of course you're investing whatever the vision or the visuality, the visuals are, you're investing it with a sort of mythicality, I suppose. And how do you do that in such a way as either completely congruent with it or it's anti-congruent? Because both of those have the same facility for mythologizing experience. Something that adds to it or something that completely takes away. And then you've got those sort of ratios in between.
Yeah. And is the mythology also something to do with the mystery that that is presented to an audience so that they can fill in the gaps themselves somehow?
I would say so. I mean, knowledge is an undeniable fact. This person could do a pirouette. This person can sing a top C.
Yeah.
They're facts. And you need to have those facts, otherwise the audience can't trust that this person knows more than they do.
Yeah.
But the mystery is this thing that they do, which nobody else quite does the same way.
It's like the how.
The how, yes.
Yeah.
The how. And that's not quantifiable. You look at some of Judy Garland singing a song Over the Rainbow. You know, it's the same words, it's the same sounds, but just something, a little thing about it makes it sound different. It makes it sound much more poignant. And some of that might be to do with the fact that she died when she did, and she had a fairly difficult life. But it's just this other thing. Maria Callas had the same quality, and you can't.
And it's a unique Judy Garland-ness.
It's something she's got, only she's got, and nobody else has got it, and they own that.
Yeah.
I guess they make it their own too, so that every time you hear Somewhere the Rainbow, you're always thinking back to Judy Garland. You're always referring back to that one, which is the most defining, isn't it? So it comes back to knowledge and mystery every time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Probably. Okay.
That's it for today. Thank you very much for
Thank you, Chelsea.
talking Wagner,
Kubrick
Suzuki.
and Suzuki, the big three.
Yeah.
Thank you.